The mongoose had crossed this riverbed many times in his short life. Even in drought years, the stones here cooled at dusk. They held the fading memory of the sun during daytime, then released it into the night air with a soft warmth that faded to nothing by midnight. The riverbed was always a path of shifting temperatures, hot, warm, cool, cold, a natural gradient every creature of the savannah understood. It guided movement, dictated hunting, warned of predators. But tonight, as the mongoose stepped onto the pale, dusty stones, the heat did not fade. He paused, lifting one paw, then another. Still hot. Not warm, hot. As if the stones had swallowed heat during the day and refused to give it back. He sniffed the air, tongue flicking, whiskers twitching. The night wind flowed weakly across the plain, but it did nothing to cool the ground. Even the shadows cast by the tall acacias seemed warm, the darkness offering no relief. He moved forward anyway, cautious, belly low to the ground as he crossed the first row of stones. A faint tremor pulsed up through his feet, not movement, not vibration, but heat. Deep, stored heat. He stopped again, confused. Stones never stayed this hot after twilight, not even in the worst dry seasons. He placed his paw on a larger rock, expecting its surface to be cooler on the shaded side. It wasn't. The entire rock radiated warmth evenly. The mongoose jerked his paw away with a soft squeak. Around him, the night insects should have been buzzing. Crickets, cicadas, beetles tapping against bark, all the little sounds that filled the darkness with life. But tonight only a thin rasping echoed somewhere far off, and even that faded quickly. The mongoose's fur bristled. Silence meant trouble. Heat at night meant danger. He continued forward, picking his way between stones. The riverbed stretched wide under the moonlight, white, cracked, empty. No moisture, no green shoots, no soft mud even at the deepest points. Only dust and rock, still radiating the sun long after it had vanished. Above him, a faint glow flickered on the ridge. Humans. The mongoose crouched instinctively. He watched as several researchers walked along the riverbank, their headlamps dancing in jittery arcs. One knelt, pointing a thermal camera at the ground. Another checked a sensor driven into a stone. "It hasn't dropped a degree," one said. "It's been 2 hours since sunset." "That's impossible," another muttered. "Granite loses heat fast, unless the entire riverbed is insulated from above," a third whispered, staring at the still, heavy air. No cooling layer, no radiation escape. The mongoose didn't understand their words, but he understood their urgency. Humans only spoke that way when something in nature broke its own rules. He moved deeper into the riverbed. A large stone sat half buried in the dust, a stone he'd climbed countless times. Tonight, as he stepped onto it, he felt the heat press upward into his stomach. He scrambled off quickly, breathing fast. His paws tingled. Then he noticed something else. The scent of water was gone. Even in drought, the riverbed always held the faintest trace of moisture deep underground. A smell he could find with ease, but tonight the ground smelled dry all the way to its core. He lifted his head. A faint shape moved across the opposite bank, a jackal, lean and restless. The jackal paused, sniffed the heated air, then turned and slunk away. Even predators avoided this place tonight. The mongoose crept toward a cluster of stones usually cool enough to shelter small prey, but as he approached, he smelled no rodents, no lizards, nothing. Only the dry mineral scent of overheated rock. The stones shimmered faintly, glowing with trapped heat like coals beneath thin ash. Night should have been cooler here, night should have carried dew, night should have let his body relax. Instead, the air felt suffocating, stagnant, unable to rise. A loud beep startled him. He spun around. The humans on the ridge clustered around one device. "The ground's still absorbing heat," a woman said, breathless. "It's night time and the stones are still taking it in." "How?" someone else asked. "From where?" "From the air. she answered, staring into the darkness. "The air layer isn't cooling either." The mongoose shivered. The air had felt wrong the moment he stepped onto the stones, heavy, almost wet despite the dryness. It was warm, sticky, and unmoving. His whiskers had picked up nothing from it. Warm air carried scent poorly, and without scent, he walked blind. He tested the ground again, still hot, still radiating heat, still refusing to cool. He spotted a beetle struggling across the dust. It flipped onto its back, legs twitching weakly. The mongoose nudged it with his nose, but the insect only quivered, overwhelmed by the heat stored in the soil. He stepped back, uneasy. Farther down the riverbed, a pair of impala tried to cross. They stepped onto the stones and recoiled immediately, dancing awkwardly to keep from burning their hooves. They turned back, snorting, and moved away into the darker grasslands. The mongoose noticed something else. Even shadows felt warm. The darkness under rocks should have been cool, but when he slipped into one, the air was thick and hot, as if the stone's warmth had seeped inward, filling every pocket of space. He backed out quickly, panting. He continued searching for cooler ground, but every direction felt the same. Heat rising, heat lingering, heat refusing to fade. His paws ached. His body felt heavier with each step. He headed toward the center of the riverbed, where the deepest stones lay. If any place still held coolness, it would be there. But as he approached, he felt the heat increase instead of decrease. The largest stones glowed faintly under the moonlight, smooth and hot like baking plates. The mongoose touched one with his paw, then squeaked sharply and jumped back. It was hotter than the air. Stones should never grow hotter after dark. He heard the humans again. "Something's stopping radiative cooling. The air is trapping heat against the ground, like a thermal lid. Animals won't survive a night like this." The mongoose didn't understand their words, but he understood this. The night had turned against him. He crouched low, trying to minimize contact with the ground. His chest heaved, his whiskers drooped. Heat soaked into him from below, from the stones that refused to cool. The air above him remained heavy, thick with its own warmth. The riverbed glowed softly, unnaturally, like a memory of the sun that wouldn't fade. If the stones did not cool, if the night did not breathe, if the air did not lift, then by sunrise the creatures who relied on the nightly chill would face a heat they had no way to escape. And the mongoose, small hunter of dry places, would find no shadow deep enough to hide from the warmth that would not die. The mongoose moved deeper into the riverbed, each step slower than the last, each breath thinner, weaker. The heat was not fading, it was growing. This confused him more than fear ever could. The sun had set long ago. The moon hung high, pale and distant, but the ground felt as if noon still lived beneath its surface. The heat pressed against his paws with the weight of a living thing, pulsing upward in slow rhythmic waves. He paused beside a cluster of flat stones, expecting at least the shadows between them to be cooler. They weren't. The stones glowed faintly in the moonlight, not with brightness, but with an almost oily sheen, a shimmer born from trapped heat. He lowered his nose toward the cracks. Normally those crevices smelled of damp soil, of insects hiding from predators. Tonight they smelled of nothing but baked stone. His whiskers barely twitched. Warm air dulled them. Without temperature contrast, even the best noses were blind. The mongoose stepped onto a larger stone, testing it. The heat shot violently into his paws, and he hopped off with a sharp squeal, shaking his feet in the air. The stone felt as if the sun were still sitting inside it, burning its way outward. He stared at it, heart pounding, unable to understand how the night could fail so completely. A breeze stirred the tops of the far acacias, but nothing reached the riverbed floor. The air down here remained still, thick, unmoving. It was as though a lid had been placed over the riverbed, trapping everything beneath it. He crouched low, sniffing again. No scent of water, no scent of insects, no scent of life at all. A dry rattle echoed across the stones, just a pebble shifting under stress as the heat continued to build. He turned his head sharply at another sound. A hyena approached the riverbank, her steps cautious, ears pinned back. She lifted her nose high, sniffing for carrion or prey, but even she seemed disoriented. Hyenas were masters of scent, but the air tonight held nothing. She stepped onto the first stone and instantly jerked back, snarling in pain. Her paws thudded against the dusty soil as she retreated, limping. She growled at the stones as if they were alive, then vanished into the tall grass. If even the hyena fled, the mongoose knew this place was no longer part of the savannah he understood. He moved onward, driven by instinct to find the river's deepest point. If any coolness remained anywhere, it would be trapped in the lowest cracks. The moon cast long, sharp shadows across the stones. Shadows should have been cold. Shadows should have been safe. But when he stepped into one, heat flowed around him like warm breath, hugging his sides. He shook himself vigorously. It made no difference. A sudden rattling buzz came from overhead. The mongoose flattened himself to the ground as a drone flew above the riverbed, its lights flickering like fireflies. Humans operated these machines. The drone dipped lower, and its downward draft lifted dust, just barely, before the grains fell immediately back to the ground. A voice echoed faintly from the ridge. All readings confirm it. 0 nocturnal cooling. Another voice responded, strained and tired. How can stones gain heat after sunset? Maybe they're not gaining. Maybe they just aren't losing. That shouldn't be possible. Radiative cooling happens automatically. A third voice, quieter, worried. Unless something is preventing it. The mongoose didn't understand these words, but he could feel what the humans feared. The night wasn't releasing heat. It was holding it, storing it, amplifying it. He crept farther, chest close to the ground. His belly fur absorbed warmth from the stones, and he lifted himself higher, trying to reduce contact. But there was nowhere else to step. At a bend in the river, he found a place where rocks sloped downward into a pit. In past seasons, water had collected here after rare storms. Now the pit was dry, cracked into plates, the stones still radiating heat in erratic pulses. He scrambled down, testing each patch of soil, but the ground grew hotter the deeper he went. At the bottom lay a large boulder split down the center. He approached cautiously and pressed his ear to its surface. A faint sound pulsed through it, not movement, but a dull hum, as though heat itself were vibrating inside the rock. He backed away quickly, fur bristling. Rocks were not supposed to hum, not supposed to pulse like living creatures. A rustling above made him look up. 2 impala stood at the rim of the pit, peering down. Their flanks heaved with rapid breaths. They wanted to descend but sensed the heat below. One stepped forward, tried to lower itself, and recoiled instantly, hooves tapping nervously against the hot stone. They snorted in distress and turned away, hooves slipping briefly on overheated dust. The mongoose tried again to find even the faintest trace of cool air. He moved toward a small patch of shadow under a leaning rock. The darkness promised relief. He entered it, lowered his body, and yelped. The shadow was hotter than the moonlight. Heat had pooled inside it like trapped smoke. He hurried out, panting. The air burned his throat. His vision wavered slightly at the edges. Heat exhaustion crept into small animals faster than large ones. His legs trembled, his tail drooped, but he had to keep moving. He stumbled toward the far end of the riverbed, where trees grew a little denser. If he could reach the roots, the soil there might hold some coolness. Tree shade was always the last refuge at night. But as he neared the bank, he saw the acacia roots were exposed and steaming faintly. Thin tendrils of heat shimmered upward, blurring the edges of the wood. Steam without water. He paused, breathing hard. Even the insects had fled. No beetles crawled along the bark. No moths drifted in the air. No frogs croaked from hidden pockets of humidity. This place was dead. From the ridge, the humans spoke again, more urgently now. Ground temperature still rising. But there's no solar input. How is that possible? The inversion layer is acting like a mirror. It's bouncing infrared radiation down. The heat is trapped. Completely trapped. The mongoose didn't know what a layer was, or what infrared meant, but he knew this. The night had stopped working. He attempted to climb the bank, but the slope was covered in stones still too hot to step on for long. He scrambled, paws slipping, each contact burning his pads. He pushed harder, desperate, claws scraping hot surfaces until finally he dragged himself onto the upper soil. He collapsed into a patch of dry grass. It was warm too, but not burning. He curled into a tight ball, chest rising and falling rapidly, ears pinned back. The riverbed glowed faintly behind him in the moonlight, shimmering as if lit from within. He watched it, terrified but too exhausted to move. If the stones did not cool the next night, if the air did not lift, if the ground did not release the sun, the riverbed would become a furnace that no creature could cross, no scent could travel through, and no life could survive near. And the mongoose, small survivor of heat and drought, would learn that even night could become as deadly as day when the world forgot how to breathe.